Development for Loudoun County. We're very excited to host you all today, along with our partners from the SBA and the Town of Leesburg, for a discussion on HUBZone updates that have happened in the last year and what that means for those of you who are HUBZone companies and compliance as you go through your different processes, or if your business looking to become HUBZone certified. We thought this was a great opportunity to hear directly from the SBA. So we want to thank our partners at the SBA for joining us. I'll let them introduce themselves. Really appreciate them. I also want to recognize Melanie Scoggins from the Town of Leesburg Economic Development, who's here today, and Danelle Hare from Loudoun County Economic Development. They have worked with many of you on the line, if not all of you, and they will be monitoring our chat box. So if you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to drop those into the chat. Danelle and Melanie will be monitoring that, and when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll make sure we get all your questions answered. Please also, as always, I feel like in 2022, we should all know this by now, but please make sure the panelists that have access to mute your mic when you're not talking, and we will get started. So I'd like to turn it over to Keisha with the SBA. Thank you so much for joining us. Katie's going to pull up your presentation, and we appreciate you jumping online today and talking to some of our Loudoun companies.
Well, thank you for attending the HUBZone program updates info session. I am Key Hodge, and it's a great opportunity to be here and present updates about our program. I've been with SBA for nearly 17 years. The HUBZone program has two teams, the initial certification and continuing eligibility team. The HUBZone program has two managers. I manage the initial certification team, and the initial certification team consists of three business opportunity specialists and two team leads. They are responsible for processing initial applications and protests. My colleague Laura Moss, who manages the continuing eligibility team, and the CE team consists of three business opportunity specialists, one senior program analyst, and a temp program analyst. The CE team is responsible for recertifications and program examinations. In attendance today are two of our subject matter experts from the initial certification and continuing eligibility teams to answer any questions you may have about any of the information discussed in this webinar. I introduce you to Ms. Angie Wells. She is a business opportunity specialist with over 30 years of experience with SBA. And Esterline Violet Elanis, a senior program analyst on the continuing eligibility team with over 5 years experience in HUBZone. Before we start the presentation, I'll provide some background on the HUBZone program. The HUBZone program was established in 1997 and designed to promote economic development and employment opportunities in low-income metropolitan or rural areas with high poverty and unemployment rates to stimulate job growth, economic development, and capital investment in those low-income or underutilized business zones. It drives 3% of all federal procurement opportunities to small businesses in distressed communities. We have more than 5,000 firms in our current portfolio. And with that, I'll begin the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay. Here are some links of our pre-application material that will help applicants in better understanding the HUBZone program, the requirements in the application process. In 2021, the HUBZone office made several program improvements. We streamlined our application process with the new and improved supporting document checklist. For those not familiar with our old document requests, we have 4 checklists that were separated by business structure. We've consolidated and refined the document request to a healthier and more robust checklist that includes instructions for uploading documents. Here are some links to of the HUBZone key definitions, specifically for principal office, employee, and reside, as well as the link to the HUBZone program regulations 13 CFR Part 126. We've beefed up our FAQs to include information on the HUBZone map freeze extension, long-term investment provision, shared co-working spaces, the legacy employee revision, and information on the governor-designated covered areas. We created fact sheets that includes tips when preparing to apply for HUBZone certification, recertification, program examination, and information on getting the most out of HUBZone certification, as well as the eligibility workbook tool created to make it easier for firms to verify their eligibility. This tool can be submitted in lieu of the employee and location list. In addition, we created 2 instructional videos on how to make your HUBZone application a success and how to maintain eligibility in HUBZone federal contracting. Both videos can be found on the SBA YouTube page or by clicking the link in the presentation. And finally, we improved our customer experience with highly trained help desk support that responds to your technical, eligibility, or general questions within a short time frame, typically within 24 hours. And they're also responsible for facilitating our popular office hours interactive conference call that is held every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Stakeholders can call into the office hours call and get their questions answered, and if they have technical or certification or recertification eligibility questions. Next slide, please. Okay. For firms to be eligible for HUBZone certification, they must meet 4 eligibility requirements. They must be a small business. SBA will rely on information reported in SAM. However, if SBA suspects that the firm is other than small, based on evidence, we will initiate a formal size determination conducted by one of our area offices. They must be 51% owned and controlled by persons who are U.S. citizens or a CDC, agricultural cooperative, NHO, or Indian tribe. Their principal office must be located in a qualified HUBZone. I give presentations all the time, and each time I do, I always tell participants that when thinking of principal office requirement, always think of where the person works, regardless of where they live. The principal office must be the location where the majority of the employees perform more than 50% of their work and where the firm conducts business. However, if the firm is either in the construction or service industry, employees working at job site locations are excluded from the count. 35%. 35% of the firm's employees must reside in qualified HUBZones. When thinking of the 35% requirement, always think of where the person lives regardless of where they work. SBA determines 35% by taking the total number of individuals who meet SBA's definition of employees and multiplying that number by 0.35. Next slide, please. Electronic verification date is the date the applicant asserts to SBA that it is in compliance with the HUBZone program eligibility requirements, also known as the date the officer or owner of the firm authorizes the application. Once the application is submitted, the owner officer will receive an automated email to authorize the application. Once that step is complete, the owner will receive an automated email titled Formal Document Request, Receive Application Confirmation. The date listed on that letter is the electronic verification date. Most of the firm's supporting documents must cover this date. Therefore, if after the officer electronically verifies this application, an applicant finds that it is not in compliance with any of the eligibility requirements, it should immediately withdraw its application. SBA cannot certify a firm that is not compliant with eligibility requirements at the time SBA determines eligibility. In other words, even if the applicant complied on the date of electronic verification, if SBA finds that it is no longer in compliance before a final decision is rendered, it will decline the application. Okay, next slide. Thank you. SBA will review a concerned payroll records for the most recently completed pay periods that account for the 4-week period immediately prior to the date of application. To determine which individuals meet this definition, SBA considers the most recently completed payroll immediately before the relevant date of review, the firm's qualifying payroll. Therefore, SBA will use that payroll to determine which individuals worked, and along with that, will use the prior pay periods that account for the 4 weeks to determine if those who worked less than 40 hours on the qualifying payroll worked enough hours to be counted as an employee. Next slide, please. Employees mean all individuals employed on a full-time, part-time, or other basis, so long as that individual works a minimum of 40 hours during the 4-week period immediately prior to the relevant date of review, aka electronic verification date. In general, SBA will consider employees obtained from a temporary employee agency, a leasing concern, or through a union agreement or co-employed pursuant to a professional employer organization agreement, employees of the firm. Also, a sole owner who works less than 40 hours during a 4-week period but has not hired an individual to direct the actions of the concerned employees will be considered an employee of the firm. Next slide, please. Okay. SBA must protect the integrity of the program by ensuring that firms meet all of the eligibility requirements during the application process. In processing a HUBZone application at all levels, we seek and must find absolute consistency. The firm must meet all eligibility requirements and be able to corroborate eligibility through its electronic application and supporting documents. For example, the firm's virtual reality, which is the firm's electronic application and any information reported on the internet. It must substantiate the firm's business reality, such as confirming that the firm is in a qualified HUBZone. It is, and that location is where the firm conducts business. It is at least 35% of its employees reside in qualified HUBZone, and at least 51% of its owners are U.S. citizens. And documented representation is the supporting documents the applicant provides to corroborate the business and virtual reality of the firm. These documents must be valid and fully executed. Next slide, please. Telework flexibility. The telework flexibility allows firms who place employees on mandatory telework in response to the pandemic to maintain compliance with the principal office requirement for certification and recertification purposes. If the firm could demonstrate that it would be meeting the principal office requirement, if not for the COVID-19 related telework measures being put in place, given that this flexibility has been in place for nearly 2 years, and given the importance of ensuring the purpose of the HUBZone program are fulfilled, the flexibility expired on March 31st, 2022. For certified firms that utilize this flexibility, at the time of recertification, must attest that you meet the principal office requirement as outlined in the regulations and the supporting document checklist. SBA will consider all telework locations as unofficial office locations when determining principal office. For example, if a firm has a total of 5 employees and 3 of the 5 telework at separate home locations, the remaining 2 employees work at the principal office location, the firm will meet the principal office requirement. Because although it appears as though more of the firm's employees telework, since each telework at different locations, that would mean 1 at each location and 2 working at the principal office location, the firm would meet the principal office requirement. The HUBZone map freeze until June 30th, 2023. The maps will be updated on or by July 1st, 2023. There will be no extensions beyond 2023 for current redesignated areas. There will be a 3-year transition period for expiring qualified census tracts and qualified non-metropolitan counties. We've added nearly 450 new counties to the HUBZone map. And also the maps will be updated every 5 years thereafter. The migration from Acelion to Box. In late April 2021, SBA transitioned from Acelion to Box. Box is a file share repository that is widely used throughout SBA. Firms are no longer required to have an account or request access to upload their supporting documents using Box. The only requirement to upload documents is to have an active application on file. If firms are submitting a new application for certification, the link to the initial repository, the initial application repository can be found in the supporting document checklist. For program examinations, the link will be included in the program examination letter that is emailed to the firm when it's due. Shared Workspace Guidelines. In June 2021, SBA updated its guidance for firms operating in shared workspaces to provide certain information to prove their eligibility. So firms working in a shared workspace must provide certain documents to demonstrate to SBA it meets the principal office requirement. The lease must include the commencement and termination dates, and the commencement date must be at least 30 days prior to the electronic verification date, and the termination date must be at least 90 days after the electronic verification date for initial applications. And for annual recertifications, the commencement date must be 30 days prior to the firm's certification anniversary date, and the commencement date must be at least 30 days after the firm's certification anniversary date. If the firm is on a month-to-month lease, they must be able to demonstrate that the lease is still active during the certification process. The lease must indicate that the firm has dedicated space and is conducting business within the shared facility. Office space that is not shared with other firms, only accessible to the firm, only accessible via a lockable door, and available to the firm without limitations during regular business hours will be considered dedicated space. If the lease does not specifically state that the firm has dedicated space, the firm must obtain written attestation from the landlord confirming that the dedicated space is leased by the firm, is not shared with any other firm, and is accessible through a lockable door and is accessible without limitations. The lease must indicate that the dedicated space contains sufficient workspace, as well as furniture, equipment to accommodate the number of employees claimed to work from that location. Firms may be asked to provide pictures to include the full length of the door, the suite number, furnishings to support the application. If utilities are included in the rent, the firm must provide proof of rental payment in the form of canceled checks showing the front and back, credit card transaction history, or bank statements covering the relevant period. We will not accept money orders, paid invoices, or cash receipts as adequate proof of payment. Meaningful work. The HUBZone program implemented a new policy effective May 4th, 2022 to help ensure that HUBZone firms are providing meaningful employment opportunities for residents of HUBZone areas. This means that the employee is performing legitimate work for the firm and is not just on the payroll for the sole purposes of meeting the 35% requirement. The HUBZone program will now require job descriptions for all HUBZone residents who are working less than 30 hours per week. Therefore, all HUBZone program applicants must submit a job description for each HUBZone resident who is working for the firm for less than 30 hours per week. For currently certified HUBZone firms, effective on the date of the notice, firms subject to a program examination may be required to submit job descriptions for any HUBZone resident working less than 30 hours per week. In general, to meet this requirement, job descriptions will need to address, at a minimum, the job title, the individual's duties and responsibilities, the expected work product, and the general job schedule. SBA will interpret the failure to submit a job description as an indication that an individual is not performing meaningful work for the firm, and the individual will not be considered an employee for HUBZone program purposes. Applicants that do not meet the 35% HUBZone residency requirement due to failure to submit the required documentation will be deemed ineligible to participate in the HUBZone program, and their application will either be withdrawn or declined. Certified HUBZone small businesses with existing certification that are found to not meet the 35% HUBZone residency requirement due to failure to submit the required documentation will be deemed ineligible to participate in the HUBZone program and be proposed for decertification. Such examples include a construction firm with 50 employees, and they need 18 HUBZone employees to meet the requirement. Of the 18 HUBZone employees reported by the firm, 10 of them are reported as working less than 120 hours in a 4-week period. According to their job descriptions, the 10 individuals are considered to be conducting internet research for the firm. Based on what I described, it does not seem logical that the individuals provide meaningful work for the firm, and the firm would be deemed ineligible. Okay, next slide, please. Next one. All HUBZone firms must recertify annually on their certification anniversary date. The certification anniversary date is the date the firm was initially certified. It can be found in the certification letter from SBA. A copy of the certification letter is located in the View Your Correspondence section of the firm's account in GLS. The firm must complete an attestation that they remain in compliance with the program's requirements as of the certification anniversary date. If the firm fails to recertify timely, the firm will be proposed for decertification, and more information can be found on the new recertification fact sheet. Next slide, please. Program examinations are conducted every 3 years to ensure continued program eligibility. Program examinations are typically 3 years after a firm's HUBZone certification, or 3 years after the firm's last program examination, whichever date is later. Firms with federal contracts may be reviewed every year. Firms are notified by email that they must undergo a program examination approximately 30 days after completing their annual recertification. More information can be found on the program examination fact sheet, and both the recertification and program examination fact sheets are located on our website under Maintain HUBZone Certification. Next slide, please. Contact information. Shown here is the contact information for the HUBZone program management team. Ms. Lori Gillen is the director of the HUBZone. My contact information, as well as the contact information for my colleague, Laura Moss, and our attorney advisor, Allison Amon. In addition, here's the contact information for our help desk and office hours call. Lastly, I would like to inform you that our former deputy director, Mr. Bruce Purdy, was recently promoted to associate administrator of the Office of Small Business Development Centers within SBA. So the deputy position is currently vacant. And that concludes our presentation, and now we're open for questions.
Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate all that information. And for those of you on the line, I know that's a lot of information, and I'll get us started. And please remember, put your questions in the chat box, and we will make sure that we get those answered for you. I also put in the chat box, we will send the presentation and the SBA newsletter that explains particularly the most recent updates. So Key, you were talking about, I think, of the probably the greatest change for many Loudoun County businesses is the shared space rules. And so just wanted to kind of go over that one more time for everybody, that if you are either certified or looking to be certified, your space must be unique to you. Even if you had been certified before in a shared space, you now must prove in your recertification that you meet the new rule. Is that correct?
Yes. And there are two things that that are really important in this particular situation, that the COVID telework flexibility is expired. So any of those firms that operate out of those shared workspaces and they're saying that I'm the owner, I'm the only person that works at this location, all other employees telework due to the COVID mandate, they must understand that that flexibility is expired and they are required to prove that they meet that principal office requirement. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll lose their certification if they can show that they still meet the principal office requirement. And that just means that they have to have more people working at the principal office location than they have working at any one telework location. So the example that I gave earlier, I'll switch it up a bit. If they have an owner that works at the principal office location, and they actually, let's say 2 owners work at the principal office location, and then they have 3 employees that telework. If each of those employees work at a different location, and it doesn't matter if those locations are in a hub zone or not in a hub zone, the firm would meet the requirement. However, if they have one employee working at the principal, one owner working at the principal office location, no other employees, and 4 of their employees telework, if one of those 4 employees live in a non-hub zone location, that firm would not meet the principal office requirement. And the reason is because there is an equal number of employees working at any one location, with one of those locations being in a non-hub zone location, that firm would not meet the principal office requirement. So that's one thing to factor in, one change to factor in. The second one is, as you stated, with the shared workspace. We have a number of firms that are new applicants, or they have current certification that are sharing office spaces with other firms, meaning that they lease a desk within an office that is shared with maybe 1 or 2 other firms. That does not meet our new workspace guidelines. And I have Angie on the line. Angie can give you a bit more context because she works closely with those applicants from shared workspaces, and she can tell you some of the nuances that she's come across.
Yeah, so that's the big thing, is understanding that, like for instance, some folks say they have a lockable office, and there's a desk within that lockable office for them specifically, and nobody else is supposed to be using that space. However, there are other firms, as Key mentioned, in there. For instance, I think in your space, it was an A, B, and C company. So 3 different companies were within the same space, even though, and it did have a lockable door, but it was not exclusively for the firm that's being certified. So that does not meet those requirements. Trying to think of anything else that we might have run across. The space, sometimes the office lease agreements will say that it's for, let's say, 2 people, 2 employees, but the firm claims that 4 or 5 employees are working in that space. They need to have space enough for those 5 employees that are claiming to work out of that space are working. And if there's some of them might be part-time employees, and maybe, you know, one works in the morning, one works in the afternoon, or one works Monday and Tuesday and the other one works Wednesday and Thursday. We can allow that, but you have to be able to show that. You have to be able to provide a schedule that shows that those employees are occupying that space at a certain time. So basically, it just has to look like the space that you're renting is actually being used by you, the firm only, and for the number of employees that you claim to be working there. Hope that helps.
Thank you. We have a question, well, more of a comment in the Q&A that I think goes to this, which is, you know, that landlords can't attest to necessarily a firm's employee structure or office occupation plan. So it's really up to the firm to make that. But I guess the way I would pose this as a question is, if somebody was looking at space in a co-working facility, is there a process by which they could submit or get an opinion from the SBA on if space was going to be sufficient, or is there a way so that the firm, rather than the landlord, has sort of, I guess, the burden of proof, if you will, prior to going through the certification process?
Well, it really is up to the firm. So the FAQs on our website and the supporting document checklist both list the requirements that a lease must contain in shared working spaces. So if the firm is going to lease space there, they can review those things and make sure that those things are included within the lease, including, you know, the statement about the dedicated space. As far as photos, that's up to the firm. We don't ever ask the landlord to provide us with photos. We ask the firm to do that. But we do want to be able to tell that the firm is occupying that space. Anybody can go take a picture of an office and say, yeah, I'm in this office. But if there's no suite number or anything on the door and you're saying they're occupying this space and we can't tell that that firm is actually working there, it's kind of hard for us to say, you know, to prove that that firm is actually working there. And that's what it's basically on the firm to provide that information. As for trying to find out if a space is suitable prior to the certification, prior to applying, we can't really do that because it's all based on totality of circumstances. I'm sure you've heard that many times before. We'd have to see all the paperwork and everything in order to make that determination, and we can't do that, obviously, if they haven't even rented the space yet.
So the best thing that a company, a firm who's looking to get a HUBZone designation can do is look at just to kind of summarize, look at the information that's on the SBA website and take that into their discussions with the potential.
Exactly. Yes.
That's great.
Everything is really laid out. Everything is really laid out right there. So as long as they're providing the information that we're requesting, then that would be more likely to be approved than not.
Great. Thank you so much. Question.
And can I just add one point to that?
Absolutely.
And the only responsibility of the landlord is to be truthful. And if that is their current situation, if they're not sharing space with other firms, if they have enough space to support what they're claiming, when you sign that attestation, that you're signing that attestation to say that what they are presenting to you is accurate according to what we have on file for them. And I'm saying that because we've had firms where, they may have a relationship with the landlord and they'll say, hey, whatever we have on our website and the FAQs, can you say that this is how my firm is operating? We have our own dedicated space. We have enough space to accommodate the employees that we're claiming work at this location. That we do have a lockable door, and the landlord will sign that when that is not the terms of their lease agreement. So we're not necessarily putting the onus on the landlord to say, hey, we need you to provide us with A, B, C, D, or E. We're just asking that the landlord attest that what the firm is stating is true.
Great point, Key. Thanks.
A couple other questions popped up. I think this goes back to earlier in your presentation. You had mentioned that employees working on site or, for example, out of the country wouldn't count against the employee count. Could you explain that further?
Okay, I didn't necessarily say out of the country, but if firms are in the service or construction industry, those individuals are excluded from the count when it relates to principal office only, not 35%. 35% is the total number of the firm's employees. So going back to principal office, if it's a service or construction firm, let's go with a construction firm. That firm has 10 employees, and out of the 10 employees, 5 of those employees work at construction sites. We exclude those 5 individuals when determining the principal office. And so what we'll look at is the remaining 5 employees. Where do they work? Where does the greater number of those employees work? So out of those 5 employees, for example, if you have 2 that work at the principal office location, and they work more than 50% at that principal office location, and the remaining 3 individuals work at another lease location by the firm that happens to be in a non-hub zone, the greater number of those employees is that 3 that work at the non-hub zone location the firm would not meet. So that is what we mean when we say we exclude individuals that work at job sites, because when we're determining principal office, we're only looking at the 5 who do not work at job sites. Where do they work? And that is how we determine principal office.
Great, thank you. I also got a question referring to the frozen map. As of July 1, will employees residing in hub zones that are expiring be immediately ineligible to be considered HUBZone employees, or is there a time frame or a window to find that a replacement?
They will be ineligible.
Okay. Let me pull up one other question that has come in. So with the changes that have happened, is there a lead time for already certified companies to comply with these new rules? The concern is that it might take some time to move or comply with the new rules.
New rules in terms of the map.
I think this is probably
the shared workspace or overall all the changes. No, so as of January 1st, 2022, any firm that is up for recertification must comply with the guidelines stated in the program examination letter, that is in the initial application letter, and in the FAQs. And if Estherline is on the line, if she wants to add to that, she can, but they will have to comply.
I think the only thing I have to add, hi, I'm Estherline. Turn my camera on real quick. Okay, is it on?
Yeah,
I can see you.
Okay, you can see me. Okay, awesome. No, there's not much of a lead time. We did send like letters prior that of these changes, and the big difference is that you're only held to compliance during the time of your anniversary date, your certification anniversary date. Before, it was something that you had to always be in compliance with. So like once you have to recertify, make sure during your recertification time, the date that you, usually we send it 60 days out, and you have those 60 days to do from your certification anniversary date, and you're attesting that you are in compliance during that time. And that's the same for program examination. We're only looking at your certification anniversary date. So you do have, I guess, all that time to make sure you're in compliance for that period of time.
I think that's really helpful, because I think that's a question, that a lot of people have asked, and I'll just take this quick opportunity to say, if you're in that situation here in Loudoun County, in the Leesburg Hub Zone, and you need to get into new space, please make sure at the end of this presentation, we're going to pop up the contact information for the SBA, for Danelle here at Loudoun County, and for Melanie in the town of Leesburg. Any Danelle and Melanie, if or any of the county or town employees can help you find space, understand what you need. That's what we're here to do. But I think it's really important that we hear from you as early as possible. As we all know, real estate in Loudoun County is at a premium at all times. HUBZone space in the town is at a premium, and so we want to make sure we know what you need, what your firm's needs are, and then we can help you with that search. So I think that's a really important point, is that it's going to be unique to each firm, right? It's going to be based on their anniversary date. So if you know your anniversary date is sooner rather than later, please give us a call as soon as possible. And we'd like to work with you to make sure that we can keep you in compliance and keep you in the HUBZone in space that is going to meet the SBA's requirements.
And we specifically look at 4 weeks time period prior to that date.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering that. We have a couple more questions coming in. Do employees working from home equate to, and I'm sorry if I'm not saying this right, equate to client site if their customer requires them to do so?
No. If they are teleworking, SBA considers those locations as unofficial office locations of the firm, regardless of if they have a contract and the client requires that individual to telework. It does not matter. We will count that as an additional office of the firm. Now, again, it doesn't automatically mean that the firm will not meet the principal office requirement. They may have to kind of, move some people around to make it work, but it can work.
So again, I think what's important is sort of understanding the situation that the firm is in first before going through the paperwork and really understanding those rules and requirements for compliance, rather than trying to shoehorn the current situation. Right. I think that's really important to note. We also have a question that's, please explain the rounding rule for calculating the 35%.
Yes. So we used to round up in the past. Now we round to the nearest whole number.
Great, thank you. I'm just scrolling through, make sure I didn't miss any questions. We'll give everybody another minute if there's any other questions. Melanie, Danelle, did you catch any? Did I miss any?
I want to say there was one question that was asked to everyone.
Oh, I see a couple more coming in. Okay, so here's one. So this is, I think, more of a comment. So my apologies to the poster. I'll try to do you justice. So it says HUBZones by their very nature are in historical districts and low-income areas, not where new construction is necessarily happening. Many HUBZone companies require only a single desk. We could provide up to 4 individual workspaces separated by dividers in one of our large office spaces in a historic building, but there is a single locked door accessing these 4 separate work areas, allowing a much lower rent offering to the companies. We cannot add a new office space to a historic building. So I guess it's a question of maybe the thinking or the process by which the shared space, or is there a way in which a single locked door leads to individual workspaces and would be compliant?
If I'm understanding the statement or question correctly, so it's not saying that the firm cannot lease an individual office, and within that individual office, they can have one desk that's shared with 4 employees. They can comply under that. The only thing, they must make sure that that one office that they're leasing is not shared with another company or another firm. It has to be their office that has a lockable door, is only accessible to them. And if they do have one desk, they will be required to provide us with work schedules for the employees to show that, okay, that one desk, it does seem logical that those individuals work there because they're part-time employees, and some work on certain days and others work on. And as long as those individuals are working more than 50% of their time at that principal office, so even if they're teleworking part of the time, they just have to be working at that principal office location more hours than they work, they telework. So, and we say 51% of their time at the principal office. If they work 51% of their time at the principal office, they will be allocated to the principal office.
I think the question was probably from a co-working space, just to clarify that if you're the building owner and you have historic space where you cannot physically add more walls or change the building because of its historic nature, you would be, in the example that you gave, it would work for a single company to have individual spaces, but a co-working space could not rent out that scenario and have 4 separate businesses with HUBZone compliance. If there's one locked door and 4 individual spaces, even if those spaces are divided, that would not count as compliant space. Do I have that correct?
It depends if they, because we will allow firms that have cubicles with, you know, a lock on that cubicle to count as an office. But we will need to have proof that they're actually operating and conducting their business out of that cubicle.
So if they can't change the structure of the office part, individual offices, there's still an option that those individual workspaces could have lockable cubicle doors that could work. Yeah. So if the person who made that statement originally has a follow-up, please make sure you add that into the Q&A or the chat so that we can make sure we get that answered for you. But I think that that's an important nuance there for people to consider. Another question, is there a program examination after the first year recertification attestment is completed?
Oh, I guess this is mine. No, so recertification happens every year. Program examination happens every 3 years. So if it's your first time doing a recertification, that I'm assuming that means you've been certified for a year, no, you will not receive a program examination.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
Unless they're performing on a contract. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Another question. We have a 4-person company. 2 of them go to the principal office. We have 2 other part-time employees, HUBZone residents, that spend most of their time at home or the client site. Would this company still be eligible under the current rules?
You want me to answer this one, Keith?
Yeah, because that's a loaded one, Angie. You have 2 situations going on there, so yeah, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so if you have 4 people in the company and 2 of them work at the principal office and 2 of the others work at home, I'm assuming they're working at different locations. Is that correct?
We'll use that as an example until something else pops up in the chat.
Okay, so if the 2 employees that are part-time employees are working from their home, then and they're both in a HUBZone, and the principal office in a HUBZone, then that can work. If either of those residents are not in a HUBZone and spend most of their time there, then they would not be eligible. So you would, in this instance, what I'm seeing is there are 3 separate offices. One where there are 2 people, and each other one is also located in a HUBZone with 2 people, right? Okay. So if they're spending their time at a client site is considered a job site. So that would be a different story, and they would not be figured in the calculation of principal office in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And then remember also that they would have to provide job descriptions for those 2 other part-time employees, if they're HUBZone employees, if they're not working at least 30 hours per week.
Yes, because that was one of the other new requirements or policies that we have in our office that effective March 4th of this year, is that any HUBZone employee that works less than 30 hours a week is required to provide us with job descriptions.
And I think I missed this one earlier. It's in the same line of questioning that you may have already answered, but I just want to make sure I ask it. Can you please outline the minimum number of hours required for part-time employees working remotely from a HUBZone location outside of the principal office space? I can say that again. That was a lot if you need me to.
No, I don't think so. So in order to be considered an employee, they have to work at least, any employee, HUBZone or non-HUBZone, has to work at least 40 hours in a 4-week period immediately preceding the application date. So it doesn't really matter where they reside, they're still going to be counted as an employee. However, if they're not working at least 30 hours a week, then we do require those job descriptions to make sure that they're performing meaningful work. I think I've answered that.
I don't see anybody jumping into the chat to say that's not what they meant, so we'll take that as an answer. I think we've caught up with all of the questions that were in the chat and the Q&A box. Any last minute questions from anybody? Katie, if you could pull up our contact slide while we're waiting, give 1 more minute for any questions.
Colleen, I would just like to add a question. How often do you do site visits to co-working spaces or to the HUBZone businesses?
So with program examination, currently we have 3 types. The first one, we kind of more so ask for the firm to give just information in 2 maps attesting to like where they are and how many people work from there. And then the second level is site visit. And then the third level is the full documentation program examination. So basically what determines that is the number of the award amount of contracts that a firm received. I don't have that number on the top of my head. Apologies for that. But I just say all of that to say not every firm will receive a site visit. It depends on like the amount of contract dollars. I want to say it's about 225,000, between 100,000, 225,000, something like that for a level 2 site visit. And there are site visits that can be done case by case if we feel like, a liaison needs to visit that space just so we can kind of corroborate what a firm is saying. But I would say yearly, maybe about 400 to 500 firms are visited per our like level 2 site visit program examination. So I don't know if I answered your question, but not every firm is going to get a site visit. It's really based on contract dollars.
I think we have one last question as we come into our final minutes here. Are owners considered in the review for principal office in the 35%?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, somebody
So
snuck one more.
Let me clarify that. If there is more than one owner, and each of those owners are working 40 or more hours, they are considered when we are determining principal office and the 35% requirement. If there's just one owner and he's reporting working less than 40 hours, we're going to count him anyways, unless he has dedicated the day-to-day operations to one of his employees. He's going to be counted in terms of principal office and the 35% requirement. So when they're completing that eligibility workbook tool or the location list and employee list, we need them to list all owners regardless of if they're a silent partner or they work 0 hours. We need them to be listed and report the number of hours they worked in the location where they work, and if they reside in a HUBZone or not.
Thank you. All right, I know I said last question, but 2 more snuck in. If you have already been electronically recertified after your first year, do you need to provide job descriptions? And what are the levels of program examination? And I'll ask the second one so that we can get them both in under the wire. Are firms notified ahead of time for site visits?
Okay, so I want to make a, oh, sorry, was that you, Key?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Esteline, please finish your thought.
I want to make a clear distinction between recertification and program examination. So with recertification, we do not ask for like any documents. You go into our system and you attest that you are still in compliance with the program. And that questionnaire is on our system, and that's about it. You will get an email saying that you're certified. Program examination is if you get a level 3, that's when we want to see the job descriptions for the ones that are part-time. What was the second question? I forget it.
Sorry, the second question
if they
was,
were decertified, if they were decertified, they have to start the process over. And so they're going to have to provide everything in that supporting document request, because we look at that as a whole new application, regardless of if they were previously certified.
Oh, I'm sorry. The word was decertified, not recertified.
No, you were correct in what it was a 2-part question, so you were correct.
Oh, okay.
In what you said.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay, and the last question that we'll have time for is a company notified ahead of a site visit?
Oh yeah. We used to do like unannounced site visits, just pop up on you guys and surprise the firms, but we don't do that anymore because it's tied to a program examination, and program examination is supposed to prove compliance around certification anniversary dates. So we would, the district office or whoever's conducting the site visit would coordinate with you a time to visit, and the email address we typically contact is the one in a DSBS. So make sure those are always your contact information on SAM, which then speaks to DSBS, and that's where we get our like contact information is up to date and current, because that's where you will hear from us. That particular email address, whatever's listed.
Great, thank you so much.
And I just want to add,
time. Oh, go ahead, Key, sorry.
Can I add? Yes, that is for program examinations. However, for initial certification, they are unscheduled site visits, because as Esteline stated, the program examination is tied to a particular time frame when their certification anniversary date, whereas initial certification is tied to their electronic verification date. So we can do an unannounced site visit on them, because with program examinations, they have to prove that they were in compliance during their certification anniversary date, whereas initial certification, they have to be in compliance at all times up until they receive that final determination.
That's an important point. Thank you so much. We did have a few other questions, but we're going to have to stop. We're right at our time. I just wanted to say thank you to our partners at the SBA. This was incredibly informative. We will make sure that we send out the additional questions, and we have on the screen for everybody the contact information for Key. I'm sure we can send out the information for the other SBA representatives. They want to send that to us. Our contact information is here. We will continue to send out information. Again, we'll send the presentation and the newsletter, April newsletter from the SBA, out to all attendees today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you for your investment in Loudoun County. Thank you for being a Loudoun County, Town of Leesburg business, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know.